Should you study a specific accent or a dialect when you are learning Spanish? This is a question that I really want to dive into because I've had this question pop into my head many times during my Spanish learning journey, and I know many other Spanish learners have had the same exact question, especially when they just start to learn Spanish and they figure out that there are so many Spanish-speaking countries. So they may feel that pressure that they actually need to choose a particular accent or a dialect for them to understand the Spanish language. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my Spanish learning journey to help guide you in trying to answer this question. Most of my Spanish learning journey has taken place in formal Spanish classes. I would say they weren't really teaching us any slang at all from a particular country, but from what I remember, at least in high school and also in college, they were telling us that we were learning the Spanish from Mexico. When I graduated from college, I started to learn Spanish on my own, and I think I brought a lot of the same mentality that I had when I was in college. I wasn't really focused on trying to study a particular accent or particular dialect from a specific Spanish-speaking country, but it was more about trying to comprehend just what I was reading and trying to comprehend what I was hearing as well. So as time went on, one of the first things I was really focusing on when I was studying Spanish on my own was building my vocabulary. So I would make a whole bunch of flashcards and I would study them all the time. Also, with these flashcards that I was making, they weren't from a particular country, at least at that time I didn't know of. So I was mostly just trying to focus on comprehending them and then also being able to see them when I was reading as well, and then being able to pick them out when a Spanish speaker was saying. So if I was watching a show on Netflix or something like that, I was listening for that particular word that I was studying. So I wasn't focusing on what accent that they had or what country they were from. I was just trying to get the gist of what they were saying, just because of how low my listening comprehension was at this time. I couldn't understand hardly anything on songs, on podcasts, or on TV shows. And the same thing if I was reading a book as well. I would look up a lot of words that I didn't know, but I didn't go as far as trying to figure out, oh, is this particular word from Colombia? Is it from La República Dominicana? Is it from Mexico? Is it from Argentina? It was all about trying to understand the story that I was reading, but also trying to understand the basic grammar structure. About 2 years ago now, I started to use the language exchange application called HelloTalk, and I was doing this very frequently, and I was talking with Spanish speakers from Mexico, from Argentina, from Colombia, and with a lot of these conversations, I was doing the exact same thing. I was just trying to understand what they were saying. So I was learning some slang from my language exchange partners, but I was primarily focused on my grammar structure when I was writing. I was trying to increase my knowledge of Spanish grammar because I really felt like I didn't have a grasp on it at all. Same thing with speaking as well. So I would always ask them, oh, am I saying this correctly? I didn't dive too deeply into the slang and then also the accent with all of my language exchange partners. I was mostly just using this as a mode of communication and trying to increase my comprehension skills and also my communication skills as well. Also 2 years ago, I actually had no idea how you would even develop a particular accent from a specific Spanish-speaking country, or even how to imitate the way that they speak in general. So I was pretty lost in that area. Now 2021 was kind of different for me because I went to the Dominican Republic twice. And the first time that I went, I felt like a complete beginner in the Spanish language. Honestly, I felt like I didn't know Spanish at all because the Dominican way of speaking was just so completely different to me. So I felt pretty lost basically the whole time that I was there, and it was very difficult for me to communicate. I said to myself that I've been studying the grammar for so long, I've been correcting the way that I speak, and I've also been increasing my listening comprehension, and now it seems like that was all for nothing. And that's when I made the decision to really dive into the Dominican culture and to consume a lot of content from this particular country so I could be able to understand them better. So learning the jargon from the Dominican people and also trying to develop a Dominican accent. So I was having a lot of communication with Dominicans for various months. I didn't have too many Dominican words that I was using all the time because I was mostly focusing on my accent. Then at the beginning of 2022, I started to do a lot of self-reflection and really try to measure how much progress that I was making. And then I realized that I was still making a lot of simple mistakes when it came to pronouncing basic words, and then also the way that I was texting my Spanish-speaking friends, and then also writing as well. And there was still a lot of grammar structure knowledge that I did not have. So that's when I realized that maybe I shouldn't have focused too much on trying to develop the Dominican accent and then also trying to to learn the jargon there, but try to communicate with the basics that I had, because one of the biggest fears that I had when I was in the Dominican Republic is that I couldn't speak exactly like them. I didn't have the Dominican accent, I didn't have the jargon, but I only had my basic Spanish skills, but that was definitely enough to be able to get around and to communicate completely in Spanish and not in English. So all of this year, I've really been focusing on the basics of the Spanish language, trying to understand verb conjugations, making sure that I'm saying sentences correctly, making sure that I'm texting things correctly as well, so they make sense to my Spanish speaking friends, because I started to realize that there is a lot of words that I don't know that I probably should know. Like, I just learned what toilet was, I think at the end of last year or at the beginning of this year. El inodoro. And it's the same thing like with items within my own home. So there's things I know right now that I don't know how to say. For example, I don't know how to say mouse pad. I don't know how to say extension cord. I don't know how to say bar stool. I don't know how to say tile. I don't know how to say granite. So there's a lot of basic vocabulary that I still need to work on that would be very helpful for me for having conversations in Spanish. Recently, for the first time in my life, I met Spanish speakers from Cuba, and I feel like I'm going through the same exact process as I did with the Dominicans last year, when I don't understand basically anything that they're saying. And I mean, there's times where I don't understand 90% of what they're saying to me, especially when there's like a group of Cubans and they're all talking, at their regular pace, they're not slowing it down for me. That is definitely when I'm completely out of the conversation and I'm just trying to at least understand 10% of what is going on. I realize that communication with them can be difficult. So what should I do? Should I dive really deeply into the Cuban culture, or should I just stick with the basics? So what I've been doing for right now is just sticking with the basics, because I've noticed that when I do get nervous that I'm not saying things correctly, so I slur my words. I'm going to listen to their conversations as much as possible. I'm going to be texting my Cuban friends as well, but I'm just not going to dive too deeply into the culture and trying to understand everything, all the ins and outs about the accents and the jargon and things like that, just because I'm also studying other accents as well from other Spanish speaking countries. So I don't have too much time to dedicate to learning things about Cuba at the moment, so I'm going to be using my basic Spanish. And the reason why I put that in air quotes is because I think as Spanish learners, we need to understand that the basics of the Spanish language can take us extremely far and be able to help us communicate with Spanish speakers from different countries. So depending on what your goals are and what level you're at, you may just want to stick to learning the basics, learning basic vocabulary, learning basic grammar structure, trying to pronounce things correctly. I've been doing that a lot this year. I noticed that I was saying vela instead of bella, for example, because in Spanish you don't pronounce the V or be like you would in English, but it's going to sound like bay. And the same thing with the H or la H in Spanish. You're not going to pronounce the H. So that's the reason why we say hola and we don't say hola. So I don't think we should look very poorly on our basic Spanish knowledge, because it's actually extremely useful. Should you study a specific accent or a dialect from a Spanish speaking country? The answer to that for me is it really depends on what you want from the Spanish language and making sure that it is aligned with your goals. But I think one thing to take into account, like I just have been explaining with my experience, is that you can definitely communicate with Spanish speakers no problem just by using the basics of the language. So if you do decide to study a specific one, or you choose not to, both of these choices are fine in my eyes. Let me know in the comment section below if you think it is very important for a Spanish learner to study a specific dialect or accent of a Spanish speaking country. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Check out the other videos on my channel so you can understand more about my opinions about how you can learn the Spanish language. Me llamo Josué, esto es Spanish Blueprints, y nos vemos en el próximo video.